Hi everyone, my name is Alyssa Corkery and I'm a senior at Loras College. I am majoring in sociology and religious studies, and I was very blessed to have worked with Iowa IPL over the summer as an intern and student leader. I also just want to say thank you to everyone for joining us today. It is awesome to know that we can come together from all over the state for climate action. Now that we have had a chance to hear from Reverend Malcolm and discuss his keynote with our peers, staff from all 6 members of Iowa's Congressional Delegation about the connections between policy and climate action. The panel will be moderated by Reihan Rashdi, who is the clean energy organizer at Iowa Environmental Council, energy across the state through educational. If you have any questions throughout the panel, please message. If we have enough time left over at the end of the panel, I will pass them on to Reihan. Without further delay, on behalf of Iowa IPL staff and student leaders, extend a warm welcome to Reihan and our panelists.
Thank you, Alyssa, for the introduction. As mentioned, my name is Reihan Rashdi of the Iowa Environmental Council, and I work on the 100% Iowa campaign, which is a movement that brings together and empowers Iowans to advocate for 100% clean energy generation across the state. Please let me know if you are experiencing any technical difficulties or sound, stuff like that, because it tends to do that sometimes with my Wi-Fi. I am honored to be here today with our panelists who are staffers from all 6 of Iowa's congressional offices and who are all doing great work in climate across the state. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. I know the audience and I are very excited to have you all here. Before we begin the panel, I want to remind the speakers that due to the limited time we have, please keep your responses brief, as we do want to hear from each of you. I will go ahead and introduce each panelist, and there is a possibility of me mispronouncing some names, so please correct me if I say it incorrectly. And after each introduction, you will have 4 minutes to make an opening statement about the work that you do and about Iowa's opportunities for climate action leadership. Once you're done with your opening remarks, please signal it back to me so I can introduce the next speaker. So first off, we have Michael Bowman, who is a legislative assistant for Congresswoman Abby Finkenauer. He covers transportation, infrastructure, energy, environment, natural resources, defense, and foreign relations. So without further ado, I will hand it off to Michael.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, and happy to be here participating with everyone today. As has been said, I work with Congresswoman Finkenauer's policy on the environment, climate change, as well as energy. And I think, as was mentioned previously about moving Iowa towards 100% clean and renewable energy, that's definitely a goal that I think the Congresswoman supports, whether it's including support for wind and solar energy, as well as biofuels, and trying to find low carbon fuel alternatives. I think those are definitely some goals that we've been working on recently, whether that's in the transportation sector, which the Congresswoman serves on the Transportation Infrastructure Committee, that passed a $1.5 trillion infrastructure package, which focused a lot on emission reduction in the transportation sector, which, as you may know, has, I believe, 27% or so of carbon emissions in the US economy. So I think working on ways that where Iowa can be a leader in decarbonizing transportation infrastructure is certainly something that we've been working on a lot of, and I think will benefit Iowans. There's a bunch of natural resources and wind and solar energy, as I mentioned before, that are available, are growing in Iowa, and I think it's important to continue working on efforts to advance that.
All right, thanks, Michael. Next up is Joe Gilson, who is the Legislative Assistant for Agriculture, Energy, and Environment for Senator Chuck Grassley.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. Glad to be with y'all today. Just cut me off at 4 minutes if I go too long. So most people on the call probably have followed Senator Grassley's career. He's been a U.S. Senator for 40 years, and today is his 87th birthday. So happy birthday to my boss. So I'll get into his record in a little bit, but personally, one of the reasons why I came to the office was just his proven track record on these issues and working with colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get things done. You know, he holds some important leadership positions in the Senate where he's been able to be a leader on promoting renewable energy, and he is Senate pro tem, which means he's fourth in line for the presidency. But also almost more important than that is he is chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, which allows him to set a nation's tax policy. And you know, tax policy has proven to be one of the most influential ways to really move the needle on renewable energy. I guess the questions of, you know, where are there opportunities for Iowans to lower our carbon footprint? You know, I think definitely one of the things that we're working on, and I think colleagues in Congress who are having these conversations are talking about a low carbon fuel standard. You know, what can we do to lower emissions? And, you know, 1 gallon of ethanol is 43% less carbon intensive than 1 gallon of gasoline. And so how can we continue to build upon the success of the renewable fuel standard and continue to use more gasoline in our nation's cars and trucks? You know, I think we're seeing a lot of success with some biomass energy, the concept of using animal manure and livestock waste as a potential feedstock for bioenergy systems, and they're becoming more affordable. But because of our large number of livestock and pork and cattle in the state, but really across the country, you know, what can we do there to capture some of that waste and turn it into energy that's a renewable source of energy? And then I think one of the big things, you know, we talk about emissions, but then what about the other end of carbon sequestration? And so, you know, how do we involve farmers in this discussion about best capturing some of that carbon? And USDA has a number of programs, and I know as Senator Grassley, he serves on the Agriculture Committee. You know, there's been a lot of talk about how do we set up a private market in order to pay farmers, companies can pay farmers to sequester carbon on their farmland. And then one other thing that I'll mention is in Ames, there's a Department of Energy lab, national lab, and they do a lot of work on batteries. And I don't know what your experience with that is, but they're really on the cutting edge of some of the battery development. And I think batteries is probably, you know, going to be a part of these conversations. And there's some exciting work going on in Ames that will definitely be an opportunity for Iowans to lead on reducing our carbon footprint. So with that, I'll turn it back over to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for touching on those different areas where we can lower our carbon emissions in the state. So next up, we have Erin Schnell, who is the Senior Legislative Assistant for Congressman Dave Loebsack, where she covers the energy and environment policy portfolio, as well as other issues including agriculture, defense, foreign affairs, education, veterans, judiciary, immigration, and homeland security. I will hand it to Erin.
Thank you, Reihan, and good morning, everybody. I want to quickly just say thank you to Matt Russell for inviting all of us to be part of this panel, and thanks to all the students as well. As was said, my name is Erin. I'm Senior LA for Dave Loebsack's office. I do cover the energy and environment portfolio for his work on the Energy and Commerce Committee. I also handle a whole slew of other issues. But in handling energy and environment, I really had the opportunity to dive into the very interesting role that Iowa plays in the national climate conversation, both in terms of the significant place that Iowa holds in the national policy debate as the first in the nation state, but also in my mind, especially in the fact that Iowa is already leading the way in the development and deployment of clean renewable energy. I know my boss is very proud of this. He often brings it up to his colleagues during committee hearings, but Iowa really does set an example for the rest of the country on how you can implement practical policies that spur investment into renewables, investments which create jobs in our state, including many in our rural communities, all while decreasing energy costs, reducing harmful emissions, and reducing our dependence on foreign oil, which is a national security benefit as well. Just to touch on some of the areas where we know Iowa is already a leader, I mean, you can't really start without talking about wind energy. Last year, Iowa generated nearly 42% of our electricity from wind, which made us the #1 state in the nation in terms of wind as a share of total electricity. We also ranked second in terms of total installed capacity. I mean, the wind industry alone accounts for over 9,000 direct jobs in Iowa and nearly 20 billion in capital investment. So you can imagine this has been a major focus of my boss's work on promoting clean energy. Each year he spearheads the effort in Congress to advocate for increased funding for the wind energy program. This includes both large-scale wind operations, but also smaller-scale distributed wind projects. We've been able to increase funding for distributed wind in particular through the appropriations process the last couple of years. He's also fought on tax incentives to help incentivize increased investment in wind and solar as well. We have a pretty quickly growing footprint in the solar space in Iowa. We're also working right now on a bill to highlight the role that hydropower can play in Iowa. We have a piece of legislation called the River Act, which is going to be part of an energy package that the House is taking up next week. But this bill would reauthorize a couple of old DOE programs to help incentivize investment in hydroelectric facilities. So either new facilities at existing dams or to retrofit existing hydroelectric facilities in order to help improve their efficiency. So that's very exciting. And the last piece that I want to focus on is efficiency. We were very excited to get a bill passed earlier this summer on improving energy efficiency at public school buildings called the Renew America Schools Act. This would create a grant program that would help public school buildings either upgrade or retrofit their existing efficiency infrastructure. And what's great about doing this with schools is it doesn't just decrease their energy consumption and lower their costs, but also when you improve the environmental quality of the school itself, you can really create tangible benefits for the students and the teachers as well. So we were very excited to have that move forward. And of course, I haven't even mentioned the fact that Iowa is the leading producer of renewable fuels, which again, reduce carbon emissions in the transportation sector, create jobs, lower fuel costs, create more choice, and create a very valuable income add for our ag industry. So I realize I'm at about 4 minutes, so I'll close quickly just saying that I think that as we're discussing federal policies to address climate change, I think that Iowa has shown that it is already really moving in the right direction. It can be a leader for the rest of the country on how you can promote renewables, reduce emissions, clean up your air, but also create jobs in your communities and really grow the economy. So thank you, and I'll throw it back to you, Reihan.
Thank you, Erin. I'm glad that you mentioned efficiency, as that's one of 100% Iowa's focuses, and I'm a huge fan of. Wonderful. So next up is Matt Meaners, who serves as the Deputy District Director and Agriculture Policy Advisor for Congressman Steve King. I will hand it to you, Matt.
Thank you. First off, thanks for having me today. I'm looking forward to this. Should be a lot of fun. So yeah, I work for Congressman King here in the district, but I also do a lot of the policy stuff and work out in DC, handle anything from agriculture, conservation, environment, trade, energy, and transportation infrastructure and tax. So with that, you know, one area that I'll touch on, because some area that where Iowa is great has already been mentioned, but is really the conservation practice within the Farm Bill. we had an opportunity to work on this pretty heavily in the last Farm Bill in 2018, and where it talks about, you know, conservation and helping the environment. We in Iowa are #1 in CRP acres, which is the Conservation Reserve Program, where we are not, you know, producing crops on certain acres, and that can be in general sign up or continuous. We're continuous acres in our farmland. We take a lot of acres that really should not be farmed because of runoff or whatever the case may be, and we put any type of practice out there, from a grass to a brush or whatever, and even with pollinators, whether that's butterflies or you name it, to really build up the environment in that way. And part of that also goes back to address, as I think was said earlier, the sequestration that we deal with in carbon as well. And so we've really done a lot of work there with CRP and no-till practices, where Iowa is now a massive leader in no-till, making sure that we're keeping that carbon kind of trapped, or we're also keeping the good soil and the organic matter of that soil onto the ground, and doing a no-till practice versus our traditional tilling practice. And with that windbreaks, buffer strips, really in agriculture, Iowa has moved forward with a lot of different practices and ways to help out our environment, and with solid conservation practices that many don't see that farmers are actually doing on a daily basis. So I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll just kind of leave it at that.
All right, thank you so much, Matt, especially for bringing that up. Agricultural practices, they're sustainable, is very important for clean water in Iowa. Wonderful. So next up, before that, I do want to remind everyone, if you have any questions, just go ahead and message it to Alyssa. If it's directed to the whole panel, or if you want to know more about each panelist's specific work that they do. So, all right, next up is Sam Ward, who is currently serving as the Legislative Assistant for Agriculture, Energy, Environment, Transportation, Infrastructure, Trade, and Labor for Congresswoman Cindy Axne. I'll hand it to Sam.
Great, thank you. Again, I appreciate the introduction and being invited here. I'll be honest, I've been looking forward to this, but now that I see there's two former professors of mine in the audience, I'm a little nervous and worried I'm going to get a bad grade here. But I graduated from Luther in 2015. I've been out in DC for about 5 years now. And as was noted, work with Cindy Axne now and handle her environmental issue area. And climate change is a big priority for my boss. This is her first term. She's a freshman, and she wanted to make sure that she was involved heavily in action that Congress takes. Earlier this year, she supported the House Energy and Commerce Committee policy framework, which, as Aaron mentioned, they're the committee that energy and environment policy goes through. And they have a goal of net zero emissions by 2050. She also, early in her term, voted for the Climate Action Now Act, which would prevent the president from withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, which is a very easy step that we can take to help reinstate the United States as a leader in climate change, international leader, and set us on like a path to a cleaner environmental future. But as a member of Congress, her priority has been trying to be pragmatic and find ways that we can work in a bipartisan manner to take steps now to address the crisis. For example, late last year, there's many energy efficiency tax credits that were set to expire, ones that you can take as a homeowner to refit your home or update your HVAC system, or as a business to do similar replacements or upgrades, and a number of other ones. They were set to expire, and these are great opportunities for folks to take advantage of the tax credit and invest in their homes and in clean energy. And she spoke to the leadership, spoke to Speaker Pelosi, and helped move that forward and make sure to get that addressed and become law late last year, which we're very pleased by. She also helped introduce the National Climate Bank Act as original co-sponsor, which would establish a National Climate Bank to finance clean energy and emissions reduction projects. The goal behind this bill would be to provide 35 billion of public capital to support and leverage up to 1 trillion of private investment in renewable energy generation and projects to improve energy efficiency all across the economy, which we're very excited we view this as a good, bold, and ambitious way to help spur private investment to help incentivize new clean technologies to address the climate crisis. Additionally, one of the first votes that the House of Representatives took this Congress was to establish the Select Committee on the Climate Crisis. And this committee was tasked to meet with policy experts, with other members of Congress and other stakeholders to kind of come together and flesh out some legislative ideas and solutions, and ultimately provide a report to Congress on how we can address the climate crisis. And my boss was really interested in this and involved in the process, and really want to make sure that Iowa had a seat at the table, particularly when it came to agriculture. Matt did a good job of mentioning the Farm Bill programs and all the successes that Iowa farmers have within Iowa and been a leader in being stewards of their land. And we want to make sure that we told that story. And Cindy wanted to be sure that we can build upon those opportunities and find new ways and new opportunities for farmers to continue to be leaders. She also met with the chair to discuss these ideas, and ultimately the committee put out, I think in June, is over 500-page report on the recommendations, which we hope will serve as a blueprint for Congress and other stakeholders to advance these ideas moving forward. And one of them, which Joe mentioned earlier, was a low carbon fuel standard adopted a nationwide one, which should be good for Iowa and good for the country and world as a whole. So we'll continue to do, I know my boss wants to continue to do what she can do to support climate change. It's something near and dear to her heart. And it's certainly a big issue and tough issue, but it's one that she's committed to addressing in a way that works for everybody, and particularly Iowa, but also one that really sets us on a path forward and towards a cleaner environmental future. So again, thank you for having me here, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Sam. All right, so last but not least, I am going to introduce Maris Petek, who is a Deputy Legislative Director and Policy Advisor for Senator Joni Ernst, where she focuses on agriculture, trade, and biofuel policy.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. You covered a little bit of background on me. I've been with Senator Ernst since about October of 2018. Prior to that, I worked for Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, so just a short drive away from Iowa. Since I'm last, I will probably cover a lot of what everyone else has, so bear with me. But I think Senator Ernst brings a unique perspective to the conservation and climate discussions. She grew up on a farm in Southwest Iowa in a very tiny town of Red Oak. She often talks about, when she's speaking with folks, about how when her dad started no-till farming decades ago, it was the innovation of the time for conservation. And now it's exciting to see all the developments and innovation that we've seen happen since then in Iowa. Iowa's really a leader in that aspect. The senator's taken many opportunities to visit different conservation sites, wetland sites, any farm that's utilizing the USDA conservation programs, as she's been going around the state on her 99 county tour. Because of her background, she believes and continuously tells everyone, whether they're from Iowa or not, that farmers are the first conservationists. Farmers want to have clean water, they want to have clean air, and they definitely want to have healthy soil because they are protecting that land for their generations to come. As you see a lot of great things happening in ag right now, it's not only farmers, but it's businesses, it's nonprofits, all working together to clean up the landscape around Iowa. Senator Ernst is a huge supporter of USDA's conservation programs prior to passing the last Farm Bill. Now, this is a little before my time here, so you have to bear with me, but she led an effort on several bipartisan pieces of legislation that looked at improving the experience for farmers utilizing all the conservation programs, but also to improve the outcomes that we are seeing come out of those said programs. Much of the legislation had a new focus on water quality. It's been an important focus for Iowa for things the state is doing. And now we are seeing projects pop up too that are not just improving water around the immediate farm, but surrounding communities, and hopefully and ideally even further downstream, whether it be down the Mississippi or just further out into the watershed. On the energy side of things, Senator Ernst actively supports Iowa's clean energy industry, from biofuels to wind energy. Iowa is a top producer of ethanol and biodiesel, which Aaron mentioned earlier. The more of this fuel that we see used in vehicles, the more traditional fossil fuels will be replaced. And obviously, the less greenhouse gas emissions we will see coming out of the vehicles using gasoline. Senator Ernst also supports initiatives to expand wind production, and she even co-sponsored a piece of legislation earlier this year to help get folks trained and working in the industry, because we've heard a lot about how we need more workers in Iowa within the wind industry. The senator has spent a lot of time visiting clean energy sites. It's been a priority of her 99 county tour this year. It's included stops at a number of solar sites, a bunch of biofuels plants, some wind energy products, and most recently at the end of August, she visited an anaerobic digester on a farm too, just to highlight the different forms of energy that we see happening in Iowa. It's exciting to see this new innovation, and I think that's a lot of what Iowa has to offer, and the future will create probably newer, cleaner energy products across the state. With that, I will hand it back to you.
All right, thank you so much, Maris, for that introduction. I want to thank all of our speakers for providing for those opening remarks. I know I've learned a lot about all the work that you do in policymaking the last 20 minutes or so that we've been here. And yeah, I just want to also mention a little bit about the work that I do with the Iowa Environmental Council. Our focuses are mainly wind, solar, energy efficiency, and electric vehicles. And there's a lot to do in our state. We are a wind leader, and solar and energy efficiency and electrification is growing. And one of the very important legislation in Iowa that was passed in our capital this year was the solar net metering law. So that is, a big win for our solar industry, trying to incentivize private and public investments in solar for our state. And a lot of very important work that we do in other sectors in clean energy. So I want to move on to the questions that the students have provided. And feel free to chime in whenever you want, but I will probably intervene if someone goes over the time limit, because we do have very limited time here. So the first question will be, how does the Iowa delegation work together to advance the state's climate leadership? Feel free to share the experiences you have, whether they're opportunities or challenges. Feel free to jump in whenever you want.
I'll go first. So unlike a lot of people on this panel, I do not handle the energy portfolio for Joni, so I have not worked actively with some folks here. But I think it's easy to remember that as members of Congress, we're elected, or our bosses are rather elected, to represent Iowa and what's best for Iowa. And within that, there's always areas of agreement. Farm programs are a common place for that. Which is what I work on. So a lot of the work Joni has done has been bipartisan, and we've seen it echoed in the House side and on the Senate side. I'm sure more people can add better examples as well.
Yeah, I would just echo what Maris said. I think I talk with Maris more than probably anybody in my office, in the Grassley office. So I really appreciate the partnership. And a lot of times I would say I work more with my Senate colleagues than my House colleagues, but I think on these issues in particular importance to Iowans, if it's a email thread, if it's a letter, or if it's a bill, I think you see a lot of bipartisanship because if it's good for Iowans, we're all going to be supportive of it.
I would also chime in on the biofuels front. I think this is one area where the delegation is very strongly united and always has been. I think part of having a smaller delegation also makes it easier to bring everybody together. But when you're able to advocate as a bipartisan and often bicameral delegation, bringing all the House members and the Senate members together with our own leadership, we have a much better chance of moving our priorities forward when we show up as a united front, and we also have a better chance of advocating our priorities with the administration as well. I think we do that very well.
Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what folks have been kind of talking about, I think as a delegation, we do a good job of supporting the issues that really matter when it comes to Iowa, and a lot of that kind of stems from agriculture. And we've talked a little bit about some of the conservation title within the Farm Bill, and other opportunities there. And we do, I think as a delegation, do a good job of kind of putting aside the partisanship and finding ways that we can come together. Neither partisan side is going to get everything they want, but I think we do a good job of just finding ways that we can work together and put forth something that would actually help Iowa. And we see this a lot when, unfortunately, we've seen this a lot in Iowa when it comes to disasters and the need for relief and rebuilding from it, whether that's down in our district in Southwest Iowa or the derecho that devastated northeast Iowa, and all many other districts. But that's a space where we really see a lot of good bipartisanship, and you can rebuild and come back from that in a sustainable way too, and in a way that prioritizes resiliency. And there's a lot of support in that in Congress to make sure that these disasters don't strike again. So that's a way that I've been kind of proud of what we've done as a delegation.
Yeah, I think, and I'm going to add something from a little bit different perspective. To echo everyone, yeah, we work really well together, especially on the agriculture and biofuels. And if there's ever, some disaster funding that's needed for Iowa, we do a great job. But to really go back to the biofuels and agriculture, it's not a partisan thing. It's not a Republican versus Democrat. We do work together. Actually, what's interesting about agriculture and biofuels, it's more of a geographic debate. You see a lot of Midwest members, regardless of party, work together for whether that's conservation practices or biofuels especially. And then you'll have members not from the Midwest, some from the South, Texas, wherever, that don't really have biofuels as a industry where they're from. And that's just them also representing, their constituents. But that's where you would see more of the debate happen in DC. It's not a partisan thing. I think the Iowa delegates do a good job working together on those issues. So a little bit different, but I figured I'd add that component.
Yeah, and I think just to add a little bit on what somebody mentioned before about staff communication, I think that's a huge part of it. I know a lot of times if your boss has an idea and wants to start gathering support, the first place we always start with is, okay, who from the delegation would be interested in this, and let's reach out. And just always having that open line of communication to every office, I think is pretty valuable. And it just shows that the elected officials are there to get something done.
Thank you all. That is really great to hear. So I know, Sam, you mentioned something about climate disasters and emergencies. There is a question from the students about that, which is how are the legislators working to protect frontline communities from climate emergencies? So if any of the panelists want to share a little bit more about that, especially with the derecho that happened over a month ago. Yeah, please feel free to chime in.
I might just start off by saying I think a lot of the emergencies that have happened and what you're seeing with the hurricanes in the southeast or the wildfires in the west, obviously these are awful and are devastating to a lot of industries and a lot of communities. And so I think the federal government has programs in place right now that all of our bosses have supported in the past that have helped communities recover when these disasters do happen, whether that's FEMA or disaster programs at USDA. And then in the past couple years, we've had emergency supplemental appropriations that have gone to help farmers who have been impacted in communities and plus up FEMA dollars so that communities can help recover. And then also, it's not just about recovering, it's about how do we build it back better so that our communities can be more resilient. And so that's what a lot of the FEMA dollars go to, not just to clean up from a natural disaster, but they also go to prevent future natural disasters. And those are annual appropriations that our bosses have all supported.
Yeah, I think a good point about equality and environmental justice there was brought up. I think one of the issues my boss was focused on with the Water Resource Development Act was on changing the way that the federal government evaluates flood protection. And this dates back to the 2008 floods, especially in Cedar Rapids. And one of the issues that had been encountered from there was that the way the federal government evaluates flood protection projects is based heavily on property values. And so it talks about the benefit of offering this flood protection to areas which are maybe more economically developed, but that can often leave behind communities that are working class or middle class as well, and support development, support protection for maybe downtown areas. This happened with Cedar Rapids flood wall project. Thankfully, the city and the state have worked closely together with the federal government to make sure that there's flood protection on both sides of the Cedar River. But one of the things that my boss pushed for in the Water Resource Development Act from this year was language that would update the factors into evaluating flood mitigation projects. And luckily that language was included. So hopefully now when the federal government and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers goes to evaluate the benefits of a flood protection wall or something along those lines, there's also other factors that they can take into consideration, like protecting communities, not just based off of economic factors, but on societal factors and protecting local communities.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Michael. But as well, I think a big role that our bosses can have is just kind of when it comes to environmental justice and disasters, is just to kind of highlight what communities are actually impacted by disasters, and some more than others. And I know Michael's boss, Congresswoman Finkenauer, did a really good job of this when Cedar Rapids was devastated, highlighting some of those low-income communities that don't have as easy access to some of the resources that are out there, or that are impacted more by the devastation, with you losing power or not, being able to charge your phone or use your phone at all, or to find a warm meal or any food at all. So I think a lot of it is just making sure that we highlight these situations and these stories, and making sure that folks really know the devastation that's happening and how badly people are affected. And then once we kind of get that conversation going, we can kind of use that and hopefully get policy behind it and make sure that FEMA dollars that Joe is talking about is allocated properly in the best manner to make sure that it goes to those in the need of it the most.
I would sort of go off of what the point Sam was just making about highlighting the affected communities. I think what we're seeing more and more is that disasters can hit any community. Almost, with the derecho was effectively a hurricane that ripped through a Midwestern state. So a frontline community is basically anywhere. And I think we need to really be talking about the fact that when we want to address climate, anyone can be vulnerable. In terms of how we can legislate on this, and I'm going to steer away from the disaster specific side of it, but when we're putting together environmental legislation, I think it's important to include language that is specific to environmental justice and specific to vulnerable communities. We have to make sure that the resources we're allocating go where they are needed, and especially where they're needed most. And we know that the impacts of climate change affect our vulnerable communities the hardest, and it's the people who are least able to absorb those impacts who are paying the biggest price. So, you know, in energy and commerce, we've done some water quality legislation where we've tried to tailor some of the language to make sure that resources are being diverted to the most vulnerable. Obviously, we want to hit everyone as much as we can, but limited resources need to be targeted in that way.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with everything that's been said, and the policy side of this, when you're working on whether that's funding for disasters or whatever, and it's important to know, and I know it's something my boss will do is, you know, have the story to tell with it, because it does, you know, take so many votes to get something passed, and so with that, you know, why is this important? And you know, virtually the storm that went through Iowa really was not played much across the media. It wasn't something a lot of people knew about. So to get it to be recognized what happened and to make sure that these communities were helped out, you really got to have the story to kind of tell. And my boss always takes that seriously in getting to those communities so he can see them firsthand. And I know others, their bosses are the same way, to take that story, use it to help kind of define the policy that you need and get what's needed, whether that's funding or any other resource to help these communities. So policy is oftentimes also very much driven by the story behind it.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Matt. I agree with Erin how, you know, the language has to really include, you know, all these specific communities that, you know, are mostly impacted and, you know, need to be helped the most and need to be addressed. And yeah, if anyone else wants to chime in, I will move on to the next question. I do know we have about 6 to 7 minutes left. So there's this program, this event focuses a lot on student and youth climate action. So a lot of students are asking, how can Iowa college students or the youth in general become more involved in helping elected officials advance climate change solutions?
Happy to start off the discussion. I think I heard a little bit of this right before we started our panel, but somebody, one of the students mentioned about it starts with educating yourself. And I think that's always a crucial, good place to start. If you educate yourself and you find what you're really passionate about, that really helps you become a better advocate. But then I also think just engage. That's really the best way to get results and to start to have like a meaningful conversation, is to reach out. I know every office is going to be receptive and want to meet with constituents. And I had a conversation with some college students from Iowa about climate change, I think a couple months ago at this point, but they're so well educated, and they brought up a number of policy areas that they wanted to just discuss and see what was being done and what more they could do. And I think that kind of level of engagement, and then figuring out, okay, we got some takeaways, now how can we do some more work on the local level? What kind of activities can we put together to raise further awareness? I think those are all really crucial steps.
Yeah, I agree with everything Michael says or said. It's good to make sure you're informed and knowledgeable about it, but also to be engaged and advocate. But also, I just want to highlight that the advocacy that you can really do on the local level is really impactful too. And I know a lot of Luther students and members of the Decorah community do a really good job engaging with their city council members and other stakeholders and those in power that can have, they can push forward solutions to get change done. It's a lot easier to be more hands-on in your community when you can actually go visit somebody, see them face to face, and be kind of a thorn in their side, and to make sure that your cause is kind of championed and is addressed. And I think too often it's overlooked. We have these big national organizations which do a great job working with us and are very helpful, and get involved in those for sure. But it's the local ones that I think too often it's kind of goes overlooked, and there's a lot of potential there too. And that's the best way to make changes is to start at the ground level in your community, your day-to-day spot. So I definitely would encourage folks to make sure that they stay engaged from that front as well.
I think they said it right. Just educate yourself and then start talking to people, start talking to your friends, and grow support for, the initiative you believe in. And then as you keep talking and your friends keep talking and the people they talk to keep talking, before long, you have a movement. And then, you'll eventually see something. And, we're all here. All of our offices have multiple people just like us in the state and out here in DC. So, call, email, and then talk to anyone you can.
Yeah.
And well, I think, sorry, Joe, but
No, you're fine.
Well, we're talking about it's definitely important to be educated. You also, I don't think, shouldn't feel like that you need to be an expert, anybody here to advocate. Just take an honest effort to learn and research, but don't feel like you need to have every answer or every solution before you petition your member or reach out to your local council. So definitely don't let that be as an obstacle for you.
I agree. Get the conversation started.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I would just offer, the advocacy work is definitely one end, but one of the more fun things to do is to just network with people who are leading voices on the issue that you're passionate about. So if there are leaders in Iowa who have a big voice, send them an email, ask them for coffee. How did you get to where you are? Even everyone on the call today is all doing that, part of the network. And I think, please stay in touch with us, and all of us can be mentors for all these Iowans who are on the call, because we were all, not too long ago in your shoes and looking, what can we do? How can we make a difference? Networking is a little bit more difficult these days, but I think when things get back to normal, get back to that and just go out and meet people who are passionate about the same things you are.
All right. Okay. I do have to intervene because we are out of time. That's great that you all are, able to, kind of share your contact information, if that's possible with the students, because I know, it'd be great for them to hear more about the work that you do and also how to get more involved. Us at the Iowa Environmental Council provides the platform for people to share and also learn more about the policies that they care for, that the causes that care about, and also a platform to contact legislators, all of your members. So yeah, that is all for our panel today. I do want to thank all of you for your time. Yeah, I will hand it to Alyssa for the student breakout rooms.
Thank you to Reihan and our panelists for joining us today. We appreciate you all taking time to share your insight with us. Next up, we're going to go back out to breakout rooms for small group discussions. This time around, we want to discuss how we can take what we've learned today back to our respective campuses and organize climate action at our schools. We encourage everyone to share ideas, experiences, and insight that can help or inspire others in your groups to take steps on their campuses towards climate action. Just a reminder, if you're not a college student, we ask that when you're prompted to join a breakout room on your screen that you please hit decline.
So thanks to everybody who's here who's not a student. We're really glad to have so many people supporting these young people. I think, as Reverend Malcolm was saying, there's so much great work being done by young leaders right now around climate change and a whole variety of other justice issues. And I feel really grateful to be able to work with those young people. And I know some of you do that every day. Some of you have other kinds of roles or maybe not as much. So thanks for being here. We've had lots of great support for this event and student interns to plan it over the last 2 years. And Iowa Interfaith Power and Light is always excited to have financial support as well as other kinds of support. So if you individually or as part of organizations and that you work with have ways that you think you want to get involved with help and support this work with college students and young adult climate leaders, definitely connect with Matt Russell or myself to help us keep growing this over time. We have over 10 colleges and universities represented today. We're going to have another event in October to bring everybody back together. And so it's exciting to grow this. We had one of these in person last year in Cedar Rapids at Mount Mercy University. And I think, yeah, we're excited to do this again and have funding for summer interns in 2021 and continue to empower and support young leaders' voices.
I want to just take a second to lift up the organizations that have supported this work this year for Call to Climate Action. Defend Our Future with Environmental Defense Fund helped support our student work. Gloria Dei Lutheran Church in Iowa City, and then our colleges, Graceland University, Loras College, Central College, they made investments into this work. And the Amy P. Goldman Foundation has been supporting our work in general the last year. And then the rest of it is really from investments made by faith-based and secular organizations, congregations and houses of worship, and then individuals. So we just, want to lift that up as frequently as we can and invite other people to support this work. So you can find that on our website if you want to support this work and support students specifically. But we're really, it's with a great deal of gratitude that these organizations have helped us do this important work.
Okay, so I'm Kennedy Warner, a senior from Graceland, and I just wanted to kind of wrap up everything that we've talked about today and kind of let our event come to a close. So first of all, I just want to thank everyone for coming and taking time out of your day to be a part of this event and to help make this event happen. We want to remember to remind everyone to please save the date for our statewide October event on Saturday the 24th. And again, there'll be follow-up information coming out about that, so you can be looking for that. In addition to that, we want everyone to be looking out for our resource guide, and this resource guide will assist students in a lot of different areas, basically how you can take what we've learned back to your campus to make a big change. Another thing we want to mention is making sure that if you are able to vote, that you create a voting plan for yourself. We have a very helpful voter resource guide in the resource pamphlet that we're sending out, so you can look for that if you need a place to start or need some help. Thank you again from the Iowa IPL staff and our internship members for being part of this event, and we look forward to seeing the changes that you each will make on your own campuses. Now I just ask that we bow our heads as I close in prayer. Creator, thank you so much for every single person that was present at the event today. We ask that you empower and motivate each of us to take what we have learned and make change in our campuses, our communities, and in our own lives. We want to thank you again for the opportunities we have to make change and impact the lives and hearts of others and make our world a better, healthier, and more sustainable place. You help us make all things happen, and we love you and thank you for that. Thank you. We are so grateful for everything that you do for us, and we are filled with love for you, for each other, and for all of creation. Amen.